us of our with peace, we will be liberated from our fear. Only then will we have the strength, awakening, and love we need to bring us together. Cherishing our precious earth, falling in love with the earth, is not an obligation. It is a matter of personal and collective happiness and survival. I'd like to recommend the new book by Seinzo Thich Nhat Hanh called Zen and the Art of Saving the Planet. There's so much wisdom that we retrieve from one another and for those who love the earth. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wanda. That was lovely. We have some exciting PA IPL updates. I have Renika Weimers and my contact information on the screen. Renika works as our outreach and program coordinator, and I'm working as our development and program manager. We work together on our environmental education and our advocacy programs and our creation care programs. So feel free to reach out to either of us if you would like more information on anything that you hear tonight or would like to be involved with in the future. We have just launched a new website and logo, and I'm going to scroll back to the first slide so that you have a chance to look at our beautiful new logo. And there's Wanda as well, our wonderful convener tonight for our chapter meeting. We also have other versions of this logo, which you're going to see over the next few months as we launch our new website, which is out there as well. I put a link to our new website in the chat, so you'll be able to look at that at your leisure. Some big events that we have coming up that we want to remind you to register for is our bike and hike, which is May 1st through May 31st. We're not going to have a virtual launch event this year. We're going to launch on our own from our homes and our offices. But the bike and hike we hold every year. It's one of our biggest fundraisers, and it is a lot of fun as well as being a fundraiser. I put registration links in the chat for you. And Katie Ruth, our new executive director, who some of you may have already met, is going to be visiting with us on Sunday, May 14th, most likely from 2 to 4. So I will get back to you with more information on that. And that's probably going to be at the Homestead Pump House, which is along the Great Appalachian Path, the Gap Trail. In Homestead. So we can walk or hike and bike and learn a little bit about the social and injustices that happened in Homestead during our history in Pittsburgh during that event. Now, for those of you on the call tonight from Philadelphia or the central part of the state or from Scranton, we're going to have events with Katie in those areas as well. We are also going to have our first Friday series on Friday, May 5th from noon to 1. We're going to be doing a virtual cosmic walk. So you'll be seeing Wanda again and our fellow PA IPL board member, Dee Kucherka, who have done this virtual cosmic walk with us in the past. And it's really interesting, spiritual, and informative. It really helps you to place yourself in the universe. It's based on the work of Thomas Berry. And it's a very, very moving and wonderful experience. So we hope you'll join us for that. I put a registration for that link in the chat. We have some Earth Day events, updates for you. As part of the Duquesne Light Community Impact Grant, we received funding to plant 500 blueberry shrubs in 2022. And this is a project that we worked on with the Isaac Walton League and the Pittsburgh Blueberry Project. So you can see here a number of our planters. Duquesne University hosted this event for us, which was unbelievable. We can't thank them enough, and we are hopefully going to be working with them again next year. So as you can see, they provided space, they allowed us to have the plants and the soil and the accessories delivered there, which allowed us to bring trucks and SUVs up to distribute the plants, and brought in student volunteers. So you can see some of our Isaac Walton League volunteers, the Duquesne Light professors, and the students. And up in the upper right, you can see our board member Dee Kocherko with E. Pomai Chakmanyahalahi, who was a speaker at our November conference and who received plants for her garden. And you can see Isaac Walton League members, Mike Stout and Stephanie Stout in the center, and some professors with Rainica down near the bottom. I had to throw in an extra slide here to show some of our partners in distribution. We worked with South Hills Interfaith Ministries to plant 60 plants. We worked with Kent Bay at Peace and Friendship Farm in the Hill District. We worked with Garfield Community Farm. We worked with Sankofa Farm, Bugs, which is Black Urban Gardeners of Pittsburgh, as well as E. Pomai's Garden. We also worked with the Hazelwood Initiative, the Sisters of St. Joseph of Baden, and I'm probably forgetting one or two partners, but we just had a wonderful outpouring of need, and we distributed these plants both in Garfield. Here's some photos of our Garfield event on Earth Day, where we distributed at least 10 of the plants. 10 more of the plants are going to be going to Valley View Presbyterian Church, and 10 will go to the Open Door Church located in Garfield. While we're there, we also talk a lot about ending fossil fuel tyranny. Just say no to fossil fuels. So if you see dinosaurs, the dinosaurs are part of our outreach in that area where we want to we often want to say we're not fossil fools instead of fuels. So the kids get a big kick out of this, and they like having their photos taken with the dinos. We also went to the Sisters of St. Joseph in Baden on the 23rd, and along with Dee and her husband Walt, we distributed about 80 plants there to residents who came to the Sisters Earth Day celebration. There were kids and families alike, and we just had a blast. It was freezing on both of those days, but the warmth of the spirit filled us and helped us to survive these 2 days. So we encourage you to stick with us for more tree planting and shrub planting throughout the year. We're always searching for more grant funding so that we can plant more and more of these shrubs. The beauty of the blueberry plants is they're particularly helpful in urban areas where folks may not have the opportunity to plant a tree because they're on a dense urban site, but they can still plant these shrubs, which grow to be 6 feet in diameter, but are often shorter and smaller than a tree. So they help us to reduce the heat island effect. They keep stormwater on our sites, and not only do they do all that, but they also feed families who may live in food deserts. So we're happy to work with all these partners and friends of PA IPL to do this. Rainica is now going to have some updates for you on some advocacy programs we have coming up.
Yeah, so hi everyone. I have a little bit to say about some of PA IPL's advocacy actions that you can participate in for the month of May and possibly beyond for some of them. So first, the comment collection period has opened for the mercury and air toxics. So this is a proposed update that the EPA has created, which will update the safeguards that protect us from mercury and air toxins like lead and arsenic that are released from power plants. And historically, these standards do work and they cut pollution significantly. So this is an opportunity to ask the administration to cut pollution even further using the strongest science-based guidelines. You can submit a public comment to the administration now at the link that I'm going to drop in the chat. All right, there it is. And the administration is also expected to release its proposal regarding carbon pollution in the coming weeks. And when that comment period is open, we will let you know. Sorry about that. Our advocacy and policy update call is also taking place tomorrow at 5 p.m. And on that call, we'll hear from Liz Marks with the Pennsylvania Utility Law Project. We'll discuss the Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program. I'll drop that registration link in the chat now as well for everybody else. All right. And lastly, We are currently collecting prayers for the earth. We're collecting them starting now during the month of May in conjunction with our bike and hike. So this is an awesome advocacy opportunity because if you write a prayer for the earth, we collect it and then deliver all of those prayers to the Shapiro administration. I'm going to put the link to the Google form in the chat. And this Google form, let me make sure. Yeah. Through this Google form, you're able to just submit your name, your zip code, and your prayer for the earth, and they'll get collected. I also have a PDF template, and I'm going to see if that's going to drop well in the chat. All right, it looks like that's not going to work very well. So maybe in an email or something, we can send this out, but this will be a template that you can print out and they're in the shape of leaves and you can actually write your own prayer for the earth on them. Somebody will have to come collect them physically, but it's a nice way to show like the physical shape of the leaf and the prayer for the earth on it, and that will physically be presented to the administration. All right, so that is all that I have in terms of advocacy updates. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Renika. You're working very hard. So let's move into the meat of our program tonight, which are the 3 films that have been offered to us by IPL and the American Revolution filmmakers. These are called, I'm going to stop screen sharing for a moment so that I can go to the film. So our first film is called, it's episode 1 of the current Revolution series. Episode 1 is called The Transformation Cannot Be Stopped. Episode 2 is called Nation in Transition. And each of those episodes is 30 minutes long. So we will stop at the end of each of those episodes and open up a little bit for a discussion before moving on to the next film. The last film is called Workforce Rising, and that is only 6 minutes long. So we have about an hour and 6 minutes left, and hopefully at the end of that last 6-minute film we'll have a little bit more time for discussion. So stick with us if you can, because I know you're going to be excited by these films. So I ask for your patience while I screen share again and attempt to show them. Sure. Let me see here, 1 second. Optimize for video clip and share sound. So this, please let me know if you're not hearing or seeing the video. Can everybody see and hear?
Yes.
The first thing that I would have to say is the fact that I am a believer. I believe that God created this world and put that sun out there, in my opinion, for us to take advantage of.
For those people in the fossil fuel industry, it is a simple truth that your business is going to go away.
It's just a matter of figuring out how to do that without leaving people behind or destabilizing the system.
Basically, every utility in this country still adheres to the old business model, which is let's go out there and build big power plants. Meanwhile, all their customers want more and more solar, energy efficiency, and storage. So you have this clash of what customers want and the business model of the past of the utilities.
To an average consumer, what they want the light to come on when they flip the switch, and they want to be able to pay the bill. You don't really have the appreciation of electricity until you don't have it.
We've got to understand that we have a moral obligation. We've got to be very much concerned about who we put into power in decisions about our life. I can get out and march all day long, but unless we understand the political process and who we put in office to make the decision, then it's all for naught.
The electric power system has been one of the most successful and reliable technological systems that we've developed in the modern age.
Well, electricity is almost like air. People just assume it's always going to be there. The system that we've inherited was fine for the 1930s and 1940s, but it's not as resilient as it should be. It's not as smart as it should be. It's not serving people as effectively as it should be. There's vested interests in maintaining that old system, but there's a larger openness to thinking about how can we move to a new grid system that meets the needs of the 21st century.
The original grid was designed to allow power to flow in one direction from the generator to the user. And now we've got the need for power to flow in both directions, and the utility feels threatened by that. The utility in this state does not want to advance the solar, other than if they own it. But they see solar as a out-and-out competitor.
In 6 states across the country, power companies are fighting to change the rules.
Presented thousands of signed cards from supporters, urging commissioners not to change net metering rates.
Shouldn't I have the freedom to put solar panels up on my roof if I want? Shouldn't that be my choice? Should there really be a utility telling me, no, you can't do that? If they keep trying to push that, more and more people are just gonna disconnect from the grid.
Disasters that we're seeing, like the hurricane devastation in the Caribbean, Puerto Rico, and other islands, provide us an opportunity to completely rethink our energy infrastructure.
Firefighters are first responders, so they need to have their communications up and running so that they can take emergency calls and take care of the community. And if their generators are going down and breaking and the grid is not on, that poses a real danger to the community because they can't even call the help that they need. So we just put up a 6.6 kilowatt system here, and it's also connected to some battery storage. So the wonderful thing about that is we are able to make sure this fire station has power 24 hours a day and demonstrate to the leaders in the area and to the community in general that this technology works. That's really going to save lives at the end of the day.
The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission says there's 9 points of failure in the United States. You take any one of those out, or if they fail, then you could have partial grid collapse. And many of our bases are at the end of the power line. And with the number of grid disruptions going on, if anything happens upstream, we run out of power and we're solely running on diesel generators.
If we're able to get them up more rapidly through renewable energy, or if they don't consume as much energy, then we've increased the resiliency of that base, so we're able to serve the communities in which our bases are located.
Thank you very much. We don't want to lose these military bases, and so as the military leaders look at bases that need to be closed, one of the questions they're going to be asking is, does the base have its own power?
There's a variety of ways, both natural events and ones that are intentional by somebody who wants to do us harm, who can attack that substation down the street or cyber attack. Our goal in the Department of Defense is to be more prepared for the full range, not just in natural disasters, but if somebody really intends to mean us harm, it's something we must protect above anything else, ensuring that every American has power every time and all the time when they turn on the lights.
We now know that Russia has cyber tools embedded in the U.S. electrical grid and in other areas, to include in our nuclear power plants, which shows an ability to scale this potentially to a pretty high level.
What we're doing today is we're demonstrating this trailer that we've developed. It's for a mobile microgrid training platform. So that way, instead of having to worry about buying all these components yourself or having to know how to set it up, we've developed the training manuals, the hardware, and put it all together. The nice thing about this is the concept is grid stability. If you're looking at having a power generation station miles and miles away and you have a blackout, there could be thousands of things that go wrong in between point A and point B. Now, if you throw something like this on a much larger scale in between point A and point B, you have something to kind of act as a backup, as a stabilizer to the grid. And if we're going to be putting these out there, then they need to know how it's going to interface with their equipment. And there's nothing that's going to stop someone from trying to put one of these on their own property.
Renewables can give people the chance of not being tethered to a government-created monopoly. They can have individual liberty to generate their own electricity.
Those states that have really intransigent utilities that are saying we don't want to do renewables, that are pushing back on the right to go solar, those states are going to lose out. Amazon's not going to that state. So go to your elected officials and say, we want those companies here, and we know that they want clean energy, so what are we doing to provide for it?
There's an energy revolution going on, including with electric cars. What I would say to the utility monopolies is you need to be supporting the electric car industry, because the bottom line is they're burning your electricity and your electrons that you make a profit off of.
As soon as electricity became central to the health of economies and to the vitality of cities, we decided, you know what? Providing this technology is too important to leave it in the hands of unregulated for-profit companies. And that's why we have public utility commissions that regulate for-profit utility companies to make sure that they're serving the greater public interest while they're making a profit.
I'm going to read from Psalm 133. Mountains of Zion, for there the Lord commanded the blessing, life forever. In Christ do we pray. Amen.
The Public Utilities Commission has a huge impact on clean air, on clean water, but most importantly on the amount of money people have to pay to utilities.
We've been living with this for years and years and years, and we want a change.
Monday, the town hall of Germfast was filled with nearly 100 people to discuss electric costs. What the public is tired of is monthly electric bills costing as much as $1,000.
I got a young couple behind me, had back-to-back $600 plus electric bills. We've got people who actually have a higher utility bill than they do a mortgage on their house.
If your Public Utility Commission doesn't have a strategy for building the utility of the future, then demand that they do it.
This is a very powerful group of people that sets policies around our livelihood.
The 2019 Renewable Energy Development Initiative.
All in favor of staff's recommendation signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
So if you want to have a balanced Public Service Commission, first of all, know the issues, study the issues, study who's there, study who's retiring, and put somebody in there that will address your issues.
You want me to untie the front?
Yes,
as you
please.
start the engine?
I don't have to go to the governor and ask the governor if I can do such and such. I don't have to go to the legislature and ask them if I can introduce a docket to do this and this, because I'm not appointed by the governor. I'm not elected by the legislature. I have to answer to 10 million people in this state. That's who I have to answer to. Because they don't about 3 million vote, but
I think when it comes to power companies, I understand the position where they are. Their job, like everything else in our system, is to return a dollar for their investors. Now, when the companies can begin to say, how do we make a profit as well as protect the environment, then I think we're on the right path.
I want the power company at the table when it comes to developing solar and EVs, because they have the money, they have the infrastructure. It's their job to help develop this infrastructure. And if we're asking them to do that, then they're going to have to be compensated for that.
We have to give our utilities the opportunity to make money in a way that satisfies what their customers really want, and begin to shift them away from that addiction to rate basing and building big power plants. And it is an addiction. They're addicted to it because Wall Street encourages it. They make a lot of money off of it. And when that's how they meet their quarterly earnings targets, that's what they're going to do.
Georgia is an interesting case history. In Georgia, the Army has 3 major military bases. We were looking for locations to put renewable energy. At the same time, Georgia Power was decommissioning 15 of their coal-fired power plants. And so they were looking for their next generation power source. So once the utilities understood that there was an opportunity for them, they really stepped up.
Pentagon said, Commissioner, we want to make Georgia the model state for the Army in renewable energy. They wanted 30 megawatts of solar power at Fort Benning, 30 megawatts at Fort Gordon, 30 megawatts at Fort Stewart. Then what happened? The Navy comes forth and said, we want 30 megawatts of solar power for the submarine base. Then the Marines at the Logistics Center in Albany, Georgia, said they want 31 megawatts of solar power there. Now we are today working with Robins Air Force Base on 139 megawatts.
One essential ingredient for our success there was the strength of the partnership. In the event of a grid outage, Georgia Power would sell that power directly to us. So they installed smart inverters so that when the power goes down in the rest of Georgia, that power will be channeled into our installation.
These military projects are owned by Georgia Power, is done in a way that benefits all customers. The energy from those facilities flows back to the grid so that all Georgia Power customers get to benefit from that long-term price certainty and the other benefits that come along with solar.
The other thing is the Army had the land, so they didn't have to do eminent domain and disrupt the local community. We have land that's buffered between Army activities and the community. Why not put it to productive use?
We have what's called in the utility business the avoided cost. In other words, this is what it costs you to produce that kilowatt of electricity. And in Georgia, in our solar production thus far, with no state subsidies and no upward pressure on our ratepayers, are coming in below avoided cost of what we're paying for power today.
There's more solar on Department of Defense installations in Georgia than any other state, including California. Let me make it clear to my fellow Republicans, we did not subsidize this. The way that we've done this has caused rates to decrease. Decrease. That is what Republicans want to hear.
The future of the grid will be one in which we see fewer and fewer large power plants and more houses that are providing their own energy, that also have electric vehicles plugged into the garage.
Well, that takes the utility completely out of the loop. So either you transform and adapt or get out of the way. If a utility partners with automotive, then all of a sudden you have mobile energy storage, and if you have vehicle-to-grid communications, now the utility has a new market.
Electric vehicles are, frankly, one of the only areas of load growth right now for utilities across this country. In other words, that's one of the only ways that their system is actually experiencing increased usage.
No question about it, the electric industry is changing, and Georgia Power is no different. We're experiencing a lot of the same trends that are happening nationwide. Our loads are not growing as much as they used to. Our revenues are flatter, and we're modernizing our business to try to reduce costs, become as efficient as we can.
We also have a focus on off-road electric transportation, which includes electric cranes at the Ports Authority. We've got the tugs that move luggage down at the airport, along with forklifts. And so we've got a heavy emphasis across the board of electrifying the transportation infrastructure. We actually will partner with equipment manufacturers and loan out vehicles or different end uses that are electric and let them test those and really get a feel for them over a matter of weeks to figure out how they can transform their business.
We need to be able to come up with policies that will increase the number of people that use the vehicles and that give the proper incentives, to the power company to want to spend their own money building the infrastructure. And these folks need to strategize together if they want to have dominance in the electric vehicle market.
There is a narrative in the United States that says, but nobody like us can innovate. And there may have been periods in time in the last 50 years or so where that was at least partially true. It isn't true anymore. The Chinese will fill the gap. They see the future very clearly, and they're seriously looking at being the world's leaders in these areas. Arguably, they already are in wind and solar, so we have to compete, or we will get overrun, and we're running short on time.
It has been difficult to get people to make this shift. People, especially here in the South, they do love their car. They love their F-150. And so while we're focusing on getting individuals to consider electric vehicles, and there's more and more of them offered each year, we are focusing on the big game changers like trucks, over-the-road trucks, delivery trucks, school buses, transit buses. These are vehicles that run many hours a day, that are the biggest polluters.
We're working on a total of about 12 different electric vehicle types that are designed to go to fleet customers. Fleet customers today want EVs for one simple reason: they have substantially lower operating costs. We're at an inflection point with the electric vehicles. The electric utilities clearly have to be part of that transformation, and their key role is to put in the electric charging infrastructure and to make sure that they have capacity on hand to handle that.
How is my favorite commissioner doing?
Fine. Have you ever been here before?
I have not.
You're going to be impressed. Good to see you, sir.
Welcome back to Greens for You.
Looks like the plan's coming together, isn't it?
It's all coming together. We have our first product in the marketplace. Last year, there were 29 million vehicles made in China. But importantly, 40% of those vehicles were made by companies that didn't exist 20 years ago.
And the carbon fiber process too is...
Carbon fiber, that's another way of lightweighting. All of the vehicles, starting with our light-duty SUV up to these heavy-duty SUVs, basically use the same chassis.
I don't have to worry about oil changes, no spark plugs, no timing belts to break, no transmission to go out. All of those things that break on regular gasoline cars are not in this car. It's not just the fact that you're getting rid of having to buy fuel, you also don't have to do any maintenance to it. And you cannot beat an electric car off the line. We have 100% torque from zero.
Now, for the first time in history, renewable energy is the cheap option. And as soon as solar plus storage and wind plus storage is the same cost or cheaper than every other source like gas and coal and nuclear, then why would we choose anything else?
There's two ways that you can think about batteries if you're a utility. They could terrify you, or you could see them as an opportunity to own them, to facilitate them, to earn money off of them. There's nothing really stopping a utility from being the one to provide that battery storage to its customers. There's nothing stopping a utility from making the proposal to its Public Utilities Commission to say, hey, we'd like to make money off of providing battery storage to all of our customers.
And of course, battery storage is the very best kind of responsive, flexible resource that utilities like. If a utility suddenly has a spike in demand and they need to ramp up production, if they're trying to ramp up from a coal-fired power plant, it's going to take a couple hours. If they're trying to ramp up from a natural gas-fired power plant, it's going to take a couple of minutes. If they're trying to ramp up from a battery storage, it's going to take a couple milliseconds. It's instantaneous. It's such a superior technology, we're going to turn the corner so fast it'll make people's heads spin.
If the utility industry and the automotive industry don't work well together, what you're going to see is the emergence of third parties. You're already seeing Google enter the automotive industry. And could Google enter the utility industry as well? I mean, where there is a void, someone's going to step in to fill the void.
The investor-owned utilities of this nation, they've got to protect their investors. They've got to have the visionaries on their boards, on their staff, to understand what impact the electric vehicle is going to have, what impact solar energy is going to have, wind energy is going to have, what impact is continuation of fracking going to have. Are we going to be able to continue fracking all the time, or some of these lawsuits going to dispel fracking?
The question is, if you're an oil man, for example, what is your future? Fossil fuels have to come out of the energy mix. How are you going to respond? Do we continue to merge around a smaller and smaller industry and eventually the last person in the room turns out the light? Or do we transform ourselves into something else? Do we transform ourselves into renewable energy companies? Do we transform ourselves into carbon management companies? If carbon dioxide has to come out of the atmosphere, oil companies could be good candidates for the ones that need to do it.
The oil industry is really largely unregulated. So unlike the electric industry, which can be transitioned from a regulatory standpoint and I think could have a soft landing, the oil industry is, I think, a lot more vulnerable to that sort of crash landing. And so it's going to be up to the shareholders of these oil companies to say, what are we going to do to pivot?
There's kind of an obvious solution for gas stations is turn them all into charging stations. They already got covers, so make all of that solar. They're all connected to the grid already. Change is hard, and large complex systems are particularly hard, but all the pieces are in place. It's available, we know how to do it. We just have to figure out how to manage that change at an institutional level without putting lots of businesses at risk of having stranded assets, because those businesses will suffer, the investors in those businesses will suffer, and the workers in those industries will suffer.
I have been in the solar consulting industry since 2008. We do installations now in a day to 2 days tops. My sales are all from referrals. I do not knock on doors. I don't do any of those things. All referrals.
I've lived in Pebble Creek since 2001. Moved from Tennessee to Arizona. For the most part, it's a very conservative community. So when I began advocating solar electric, I was concerned that it might be a partisan issue. It is not a political issue. It is apolitical.
Hey, Charlie. How are you?
I am terrific.
We're into your hood.
You really are. And I
Yeah.
got to tell you,
So
this
what is the number
whole
now,
area
guys?
has a ton of 1,406.
So we're officially at 1,406 solar energy systems
Yes.
on rooftops in
on
Pebble
rooftops
Creek,
in Pebble Creek.
which is what, 30%?
30%.
Of the entire community.
Yes.
Come on in. Good to see you. I'm Cher. My husband Mike.
Good morning, welcome.
When I was on the commission, we established the policies like net metering and the renewable energy standard that really led to the boom of solar in Arizona. Believe it or not, it was an all-Republican commission at the time, and we actually believed that people would go solar. You know, I'm curious as a former commissioner why you initially decided to do it.
If I can save $2,000, $2,200 a year,
Yeah.
why would I not do that, particularly on fixed incomes?
My first Arizona summer electric bill. I'd never seen a $400 monthly electric bill, and I was scandalized by that amount.
It's free, it's
It's a
sun,
win-win-win. There are no downsides.
Let's look in using that.
If we can scatter the creation of electricity throughout a neighborhood, we don't have to build a giant plant right out here in the desert that burns coal and fouls the air of the Grand Canyon and requires transmission lines to get the power back into town.
I think of the utility companies as the bully. For all of us around here, we want solar for the right reasons. It's the right thing to do for us, for the environment, for our neighbors, for the country. And then you're fighting the people that are doing it for greed. And it ticks me off.
If we don't get our act together and start utilizing the technologies that are available to us now, we are going to be, the United States is going to be left in the dust.
Technologies we invent.
Yes, that we invented, we're going to be left in the dust.
There's virtually no one that is opposed to solar. Now that differs from our elected officials who think that they need to be anti-solar, but they're going against their constituents when they say that.
Can you give us an update about the tax credit or any bills that impact electric vehicles?
All new build residential has to be EV ready. Just making the business case, we're going to literally drive traffic to your establishments, to rent in your units if you can provide EV spaces. The market is demanding this.
And that's why the commissioners need to understand electric vehicles. They need to be driving electric vehicles. I've been criticized a little bit by my own party for wanting to subsidize electric vehicles or to give solar more value. There are benefits to a tax credit, for example, for electric cars. Georgia was second only to California before we removed our tax credit. So when the legislature eliminated it, electric car sales began to skid in our state, dropped 95%, as a matter of fact.
Solar is not something that only tree huggers like. What is more conservative than generating your own electricity and not be dependent on someone else to do it for you?
Just because they're conservative doesn't mean they can't embrace electric cars. Or like not having to be beholden to whatever the utility decides they want to charge them. There's a while where when I first came out to North Carolina and I was racing and I wanted to fit in. And at some point I just realized I'm so different from so many people in the garage that I sort of gave up on fitting in. I will have hit 70,000 miles by the time I get home on the Tesla. I mean, think of how much money I've saved in gas over 70,000 miles. Without the race car, the demographic of people that I would be able to reach would be so much smaller if I was just still a biology scientist. I can't expect NASCAR fans to show up at a clean energy conference in Aspen. You know, it's not going to happen. They're not going to come to the Environmental Film Festival. It's sort of like I'm on these two sides and I'm balancing these two worlds, and I don't fit in completely on either side, but I get to see both of those audiences talking to me as one of them. And there is so much more that we share than what divides us.
Put it on a moral foundation. Everyone has a right to clean water, to toxic-free air. When we talk about many of the environmental injustice issues, this is the civil rights issue of our time.
Take care and protect my creation. We will stand as one united force.
And we as human beings who've been charged with being stewards of a planet that has been given to us that was perfectly balanced in terms of water, in terms of air, and we have been destructive and we have neglected our moral responsibility in doing what's so necessary so that not the next generation, this generation can have a more sustainable way of life. So therefore, we have an obligation to fight. We will not bend, we will not break, and we will not bow down.
I'm going to pull out of the music at the ending. I hesitate to do that because I'm a film goer who likes to stick with it until the very end, but I want to make sure we have time for discussion. I think we're all on the same page in this phone call and across the PA IPL network in the understanding that all of our faiths, although we're varied in the faith that we adhere to, all of our faiths or our ethical beliefs say that we should be responsible for the earth. We should be responsible stewards for the earth. And not only that, but that we should be responsible for the people who are affected by pollution and by the people who will be affected as we make this transition to clean energy in our country. Would anyone like to comment on that statement or have anything about their individual faiths that they would like to share? So we're all pretty much in agreement there. One thing that stood out to me, or several things that stood out to me, because I hadn't had a chance to view the film before tonight, it was the focus on the utility portion and the focus on public utility commissions and the national security issues that are at stake for us. So I feel like there were some wonderful talking points that we all can use here, and I'm going to view the film again, and I'm sure Rainika and our other policy staff members will take a look at it again and make a checklist for us as we move forward, so that as we develop templates for our advocacy arm of our organization, we can give you real fuel, so to speak, no pun intended, real fuel for talking to your legislators, especially in Pennsylvania. Does that sound like a great idea to you? We have a problem with our Public Utility Commission here in Pennsylvania, so that's why we need to go to our legislators. Would Rainika or Phyllis like to comment on that?
I'll comment, and I'll also go on camera so people can see me. It's such a huge problem in Pennsylvania because Pennsylvania makes money by fracking. We are one of the largest, we are the second largest oil, fracked gas producing in the nation. And the other reason that we don't really have a real motivation for us to change it is we have a very, very low alternative energy portfolio standard. So there's no motivation for anybody to raise it up. It's 6% or 5%. That was fine 25 years ago when we started that. Every other state around us, except for Ohio, is like 60% renewable. So there's really very, very little motivation for anybody to change. And certainly the utility companies don't want to change. Why should they change? Every time you put a solar panel up, you're taking money away from them because you're not generating any money from them in terms of electricity. And I understand why the utility companies really hate solar, and they're doing everything they can, like that state, I think it was Arizona, where they're talking about changing the net metering policy to not allow it. The electric companies will do everything to make it slower so that it's not happening. And then the other thing is that we're really looking at utility scale type of operations, and the regional approving body is on hold for the next 2 years because they're so far behind. So yeah, we've got to work every possible avenue we can. Our local commissioners, our state level people. It's hard to work with an electric company, but we've got to do all those things.
Phyllis, did you think it was encouraging to see that the ultra conservative state of Georgia and the fairly conservative state of Arizona, even though they were talking about removing some of the net metering opportunities for people installing large scale at home or on their business, I thought that it was amazing the way the state of Georgia is leading the way, particularly in the military installations. So if we have the military on board and we have these ultra-conservative states on board, I wonder if there's a way we can craft our message to bring those, to highlight those successes so that when we approach our legislators, we have some fuel to show them how it can work. There's some good case studies I thought in here that actually work.
The military one was really encouraging to me, but Pennsylvania we've got to realize the reality of Pennsylvania. There's a huge amount of natural gas that's produced, and the state legislators do not want to go against it. I'm pretty optimistic that our new governor wants to bring this in place and it wants to work on this, but he also knows that the labor unions may or may not be in favor of this. I think one of the places we really need to work is with the labor unions. Because there's lots of jobs in clean energy. There's all the jobs for installation. There's lots of jobs if we put in any solar farms around here or wind turbines. We've got a lot of mountains in Pennsylvania, so wind turbines have a potential. But it's not the current labor unions. You know, they're not. It's not the pipe fitters. It's people that are. It's a new generation of technology. You know, solar installers are not the people who've worked in the gas industry.
I think it's
So I don't think Pennsylvania will look to Georgia and say, "Oh yeah, I like that." I mean, Texas, I think, is a much better example because Texas is a really huge oil and gas producing state, and they produce more wind than we do.
Did someone else want to make a comment there? I heard something in the background there. Yeah, that's a good point. So we should look for all of the states that make good case studies for us so that we can use them in our work. You know, with national security issues, petroleum costs threaten us. They hold us hostage in terms of where we can purchase fuel and how much we can purchase it for, and that guides us in our foreign policy. There's also, it seems to be this economic competition going on. We don't want to be left behind as a nation where we don't have the technology to keep up with the rest of the world and see our economy held hostage by that. And then there's also like the smaller scale economic issues of the residential customers with high utility bills, businesses with high utility bills, or manufacturers who keep having to raise their prices to deal with higher utility bills. And then people like the fleet customers, which I thought was really interesting. I know here in Pennsylvania, there's a trucking company called Pitt, Ohio, and they have large facilities in Ohio as well as Pittsburgh, and they're trying to make a transition to solar and wind. They've combined the two, and they bring them into their facility as DC power, and then they use them to the greatest extent they can to power things at the DC level, so they don't lose in the transition from DC to AC. So if I will try to get you all some information on Pitt, Ohio's efforts, because they are a trucking company. They are extremely concerned about their footprint and what they do. So they're trying to make a difference in other ways to reduce their carbon footprint. So Brenda mentioned another film highlighted the use of solar by farmers in Iowa. And the farmers co-op signed on because solar was cheaper and more reliable. So in the agricultural areas of our state, I think that's a great angle. Brenda, I agree. We try to work with ag producers. PA IPL tries to work with ag producers to enlighten them on the benefits of solar so that they don't go under contract with let's say, a fracking outfit, but they go under contract with a solar outfit instead. We've had several events that highlight solar agriculture, and it turns out that I can try to send you those links in the near future, and it turns out that some of the livestock benefits from grazing underneath the solar panels, and they can still grow underneath the solar panels, particularly smaller livestock like sheep and goats. I think it's a little tougher with cows because they have to raise them up higher because cows are just bigger, but they can do it for cows, and we do. I think we're a big dairy state, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think we're a big like Texas Longhorn beef producing state. I think we're more dairy oriented. So I think there's a lot of potential there as well. Thanks for bringing that up. Any other comments before we move on to film 2?
The only thing that caught my attention was the power storage, and I've read that like the lithium batteries are still very expensive and use resources that are mined in not very just ways, to put it mildly. So do the other films touch on that subject?
We shall see. Go ahead, Phyllis.
Actually, with solar storage, battery storage, you can use recycled batteries. So something that's from your car, you don't want it at a 78% capacity level. So you would say, I need a new battery if it was on your car, but 78% in a massive storage facility would be just fine. So I'm really optimistic that battery storage is going to be much more affordable and much more sustainable and cleaner.
Yeah, and our universities in Pennsylvania are way ahead of the curve in performing research on alternatives to lithium, so that the batteries can be installed in other types of vehicles going as far as airplanes. You can't really have a lithium battery in an airplane. That's just too dangerous. But they're looking at different fluids and to make the catalytic reaction that they need. So we're getting there. We're getting there. But I agree. Yeah, we don't want to end up. It's almost like blood diamonds. We have blood lithium, in a sense. So, and the recycling's coming along too. Any other questions or comments? So let's dive into film number 2. I think I hope I'm still recording. Yes. Okay, I'm going to share Current Revolution, the Transition, Nation in Transition.
It takes a lot of water to produce our energy. It takes a lot of energy to move our water. There's a total lift of about 2,000 feet with a dozen or so separate pumping plants to do that lift. The canal is 300 some miles long as it comes into Phoenix and then heads south to Tucson. And it is the largest user of electricity in the state of Arizona. We need to pump water 24 hours a day, whether the sun is shining or not. And coal provided that reliability.
For half a century, coal has been one of the cheapest forms of electricity available. It's no longer so cheap. The shift to clean energy in electric vehicles is already happening, and is happening faster than anyone expected. Now our task is to manage that transition to ensure that it is both just and sustainable.
There's a lot of economic prosperity that's going to come along with this transformation, but there are going to be costs. Some whole categories of jobs are just going to disappear.
Take a new job far from home, or face unemployment. That's the decision facing hundreds of employees of the Navajo Generating Station.
Last year, officials from the Navajo Nation and Salt River Project decided to shut down the plant.
It is emotional. A lot of people, when they lose their livelihood, it's like losing a loved one. That meal is not there no more. The payment for the mortgage or the payment for the vehicle, those are all gone.
Our daily routines and habits, all the way up to the way we organize geopolitics, the way we distribute wealth and power in the world are wrapped up in this thing that we call the energy system. So when we change it, we're going to get changes in everything else at the same time. We need to start learning now, and we need to learn at a pace and a scale that we've never learned before.
Like 1940, there's only 400,000 people, population in the state of Arizona. Now we got 7 million people. For 50 years now, we gave low-cost energy and power for the state of Arizona so they could have what they have now. We didn't profit from it.
For decades, a large portion of the Navajo Nation's income has derived from coal royalties. Coal that was mined here and used to produce energy for Phoenix, Vegas, and California didn't yield a quality of life that the people in Phoenix, Vegas, and California enjoy.
The raw resources, Navajo resources, were purchased at low prices, rock bottom prices. Navajo water from the upper basin Colorado River was used to help with the operation of the Navajo generating station. We waived our rights to claim any of that water for the duration of the power plant, and we never got any payment for it.
There used to be a lot of water around here. We didn't have to travel a distance to get water. So I would say that we spent more money for our water than people that have running water. Because we had to buy gas, we had wear and tear on our vehicle to get water from the chapter house and haul them back for our drinking water or for our livestock. I'm glad that they're shutting it down. But we would like to see them to fix it the way it was before. And they just can't leave it like that and leave.
I'm 50 years old and these guys are just now leaving. And I've spent the prime of my life battling the pollution here and not being able to herd sheep on my family ancestral land and not being able to farm here. And so I never got a chance to use any of this land.
The plant was built when I was in high school. My dad was hired by SRP to work at the plant. So it was important to our family that he was employed there, and it was a good thing for us. I started at SRP in 1979 as an operator trainee. Once the plant was built and people were employed there, I think we thought it was just going to be there forever. There was no thought that it was ever going to close down. People had raised their families there. It just seemed like part of the community. So the news of shutting it down really was a shock, I think, to everyone. It was just unexpected. I had always thought I was going to retire there, but word came down that we weren't going to be economically viable anymore.
As much as the Navajo Nation has depended on the coal and this operation, it has never really brought prosperity to the nation, and it has never really taken the nation out of the high unemployment rate that persists even today.
I'm a union iron worker for local Ironworkers 433 in LA. So it's a ways from here to find work, but that's the only place I can find work. Nothing around here for us. So you got the mine and the plant, there's only 600 workers, but there's 300,000 of us. And then where do they find work? There's no work at home. So you got mom and dads having to travel that far away to find work, and you got your kids at home with grandma, grandpas, and having the whole nation 50% unemployed, and then you got 60% of people in poverty.
What we're confronted with now is declining government resources and a larger population to sustain. The great opportunity here is to invest in solar or wind for communities that have bore the brunt and the adverse impacts of extraction, but never received the appropriate compensation for giving up land, water, cultural or religious resources that may be contaminated forever. It's critical that we chart a new path defined by our traditional values, being able to have a family, your animals, and multi-generations living in the community you've always lived in. And at the same time, participate in the modern world and in the community of nations.
I think we have a design challenge. The way that we design the ownership of that energy, the geography of that energy, the way that we design the markets, it is the opportunity of a century to build a low carbon future that does more for us than just replace the energy system that we have with a new one. And that's one of the things we can start learning with what's happening here in Arizona around the Navajo Nation, because we've never tried to do anything like this on this scale, this complexity, this deeply integrated into our human systems.
We have a long and not so great relationship with the federal government, not to mention all the other entities that have come on and off the Navajo Nation. We're still a sovereign nation. And when we say sovereign, that means we can determine our own destiny. It's not only a trust issue between the Navajo people and outside entities. It's a trust issue between we as well as the Navajo government and our Navajo communities. We're a big government. We have about 300,000 members, and that means we have to build consensus among our own Navajo people and our own communities. If you don't have a total buy-in of the whole community, the discontent with one stakeholder who's not happy with the process, their discontent kind of grows and it starts reaching into other parts of the community, and pretty soon you don't have that buy-in. There's no trust of the process anymore, and people feel left out.
We collectively need to win. I don't give a damn which party wins. I want answers. When a conflict arises, the ability to pick up the phone and call the city manager and say, this is what my attorneys are telling me, and that we need to go to court with you. What are your attorneys telling you? And can we kick the attorneys out of the room and solve this problem? That's essential.
Arizona Public Service Company has been the largest provider of electricity in the state of Arizona for more than 100 years. We operate 2 coal-fired power plants, one in northeastern Arizona, and that's the Cholla Power Plant. And that plant is slated to close in 2025. And we announced that closure in 2015. It is really important to start planning before there are plans to formally close the plant and start talking about what will happen when the plant closes. It is never too early to begin these conversations. So you would have regulators and legislators at the table, you would have your Public Utility Commission representatives at the table, environmental groups, faith groups, labor organizations, and then obviously the electric utility. And a lot of these folks bring different perspectives, and that's one of the challenges in this space, is figuring out how to reconcile those perspectives.
You can't over-communicate. We're beginning to think about other power plants that we have. What's the transition that we want to help those communities with now, even if they may not close for another 7-8 years? Begin those discussions, because these transitions take a long time. We made a commitment to the Navajo Nation overall to make this transition work. And so I think there's opportunities to do it no matter if you're an investor-owned utility, public power utility, or a co-op utility.
In the case of SRP, they provided information to the community about timelines. They announced that they were going to actually offer jobs to all of the employees. And that was a huge thing. I can't even believe they did that. If I were not offered another job within SRP, I don't know what I would have done.
Providing this level of support, providing these resources will help to contribute to a vibrant economy here in Arizona. And that is so important for our business success. And so we've got every confidence that this will be beneficial not just for our customers and our employees, but also for our shareholders.
We have reclaimed mine areas. You got Navajo Mine and McKinley Mine near Gallup. Then you got Kayenta Black Mesa Mine. 3 areas that we can build off to build solar fields. And then we got power lines coming through our homeland. We can light up the city of Phoenix, Tucson.
The negotiations between the utilities and the Navajo Nation has left the Navajo Nation with a certain amount of assets from the Navajo generating station. The Navajo Nation was able to get the water pumps at the generating station. The Navajo Nation was able to get 500 megawatts of transmission lines committed to them from the Bureau of Reclamations. So those are really significant.
The biggest question was, if we have transmission lines and power generating facilities on the Navajo Nation, why are there still Navajo people out there without electricity? A lot of the times people already live where they live. They live in their ancestral areas. They've grown up there for generations, and that's where they want to be. Every community has a group of people who don't have electricity, they don't have water. It's really expensive to run power lines, and so renewable energy really offers those local solutions.
NTUA made a decision a number of years ago to start to develop renewable energy within the reservation, recognizing the abundance of renewable energy available here. We hired approximately 250 local Navajo and trained them. Many of them have gone on to work at other plants and continue to build. Now that they're built, they're providing energy for the local area, reasonably priced and reliable. In addition to that, we sell renewable energy credits to others outside of the Navajo Nation, and the revenue from that goes directly back to construct lines to those folks that currently don't have electric power within the nation.
The COVID-19 death toll continues to rise in the U.S. Fear is mounting the spread of the virus could devastate tribal communities.
I think one of the reasons why we were so impacted on the Navajo Nation with COVID is the fact that you have a lot of people not having access to things as simple as information. A lot of the information was spread through the internet. And when you don't have electricity, you don't have computers, you don't have TV, you don't have satellite, now you're kind of limited to if you get radio signal, if you get cell service. It also limits the storage of their food. This requires them, if they don't have electricity, to go and get ice. If their stores were closed, they were going further out and further out. And so they would have to go to the border towns when our stores weren't open. A lot of our relatives have respiratory issues and they have challenges with the air quality. That being compounded by a virus that attacks that exact thing really affected people that were already in a disadvantaged position. And so owning that process going forward in energy development for us is what we feel is needed in order for us to make sure we don't go down those same paths again. Out of college, I returned back home and I really was looking to create jobs and solve issues for my people. We looked at how we could form a company that would develop projects that we feel are in tune with the cultural and the local values. And we feel like we brought some of those values from Silicon Valley with fundraising and capital investment and markets into the nation, so that we can utilize those resources and those allies to be able to develop our projects.
Check down. So reverse your polarity on your leads there and then remeasure. And guess what's going to happen to my charge controller?
Negative.
Right, you see that negative on there?
We're here in Hard Rock, Arizona, doing our very first solar training, and it's a 6 to 8 week program. We have about 10 Native students who are participating. And this is really a huge effort for us to invest in the Native community and be able to employ our own people to provide off-grid power for families that need it. One of the goals of the workforce training programs that we have here is to prepare and empower local Native people to go into the solar workforce. That doesn't necessarily have to be here on the reservation, and they don't necessarily have to be installers, but we do want to give them the tools to succeed out in the renewable energy world. A lot of the applicants knew or have relatives and family that don't have electricity, so they want to be able to install their own system and know how to maintain it.
This is an immense opportunity for us to think about what traditional indigenous governance works, and it should be established between Indian tribes and not dependent on the federal government. Then we will be able to demonstrate to tribes across the country how they can work collectively to achieve our goals as people who are indigenous to the United States, but not dependent on it to prosper.
There's no model or template for how to do this. We are making this up as we go. But we do believe that it is our social responsibility to ensure that we help these legacy coal communities whose contributions were critical to the success that we experience today, and really for the economy that our nation is built on. This is because of people who have done hard work in coal mines and coal plants. And we owe them a debt of gratitude, ensuring that we don't leave them behind as we make this transition that we have to make. We cannot leave them behind.
Historically, energy has been one of the unfortunate drivers of inequality. Energy is deeply wrapped up in how we distribute wealth in the world. It takes money from all of us to pay for our fuels and our electricity, and it sends it off into the hands of a much smaller array of people and institutions and organizations. We could do a better job of designing that so that the energy system actually works the other way. It becomes a generator of economic security that helps alleviate poverty. It becomes a generator of income.
If we get this transition in northern Arizona right, we can take all the lessons from that and apply them to many other transitions that we'll be facing in the years to come. Like the electric vehicle transformation, we're going to need a transition plan and transition assistance for that to take care of the jobs and the communities that are dependent on the old internal combustion engine that is going to be going away shortly. And the transition that coal communities are facing today are going to be faced by natural gas communities. We're going to start seeing communities suffering from the loss of natural gas fracking, natural gas processing activities, and the power plants that are run on natural gas.
The biggest question is, do we have the political will to come together and govern ourselves? That is where we have our biggest problem. If we fail to do so, I think we as a country certainly won't be a global leader anymore. And globally, if we as a species fail to face these things, I think we do face some dire consequences. What that means for us long term, it's hard to say. But, you know, the world will go on. It existed before we were here as a species, and it will exist regardless of where we go. We may leave it damaged behind us, but it will survive us.
How do we ensure that these things exist for our kids into the future? To me, it's that simple. I want to make sure that I have said what I need to say and have done what I needed to do. And that way, at least the future generations will never say to me, why didn't you speak up for me? And, you know, I'll never be to blame. There's nothing that beats a clean conscience, I don't think.
There we go, film number 2. We have 6 minutes left in the third film. Should I move straight onto that one since it's short, and then we can finish our discussion afterwards? Thank you so much for all hanging on. Oops. Share again.
We need more electricians. We need more people in the field. The energy industries are going to need a lot of money to train this entirely new breed of technicians.
Power companies and utility companies need to be a part of this. They're just as much a part of it as the dealers are. We provide the cars, they provide the fuel.
If they had full service charging stations, that would give some people jobs, you know what I mean? It's important, you know? So I think it's fascinating. I think it's going to be a great future.
That feels like a bullet train and works like a freight train.
While this is exciting, this is not going to be a soft ride. This is going to be pedal to the metal.
An electric truck that can help build your house, and if need be, power that house.
It's a really good time in transportation, but if we want mass EV adoption, everybody has to be able to see themselves driving an EV, or even see how they could be a part of this industry.
In order for our customers to feel comfortable about buying an EV today, they also need to know wherever they're going, there are chargers available. I mean, you have to go where the demand is. And if we can get the pricing to where it needs to be, and I think as we build more production of vehicles, we can help drive some of that pricing down, get the pricing of batteries down.
Customers are going to have a lot of questions, and we're going to have to be prepared to answer those questions. And then that's the one I want there.
And you're okay waiting?
Yep. Selling is nothing but a transfer of emotion, and if we're not excited and enthusiastic about the change, that's never going to get transferred to the customer. So we have to buy into it first before the customer can even think about doing that. It isn't going to cost a lot of money to commute, so at the end of the day, it'll be good for the customer.
In the world of dealers, service is where they make most of their money. It's not on car sales. Those are paper-thin margins. Where the dealers generate the cash flow is in doing service work on vehicles. That's a whole nother level of disruption that is occurring at this point.
Seen that this industry was not going to survive if we didn't deal with why the stations were experiencing the issues that they were. Everyone's just focused on installing, and I'm seeing, half of the stations in Texas not working, or I'm seeing that stations are offline for like months and months at a time, and we can't source the right parts to put them back together. And I'm like, this is gonna destroy this industry. And so I was like, I could build that company.
You have manufacturers, network providers putting down charging stations. So having operations and maintenance in place and ready to go is vital. And by day 4 or 5 of the training, you see their eyes lighting up, starting to really get it. When they can be the driver of the EV, when they understand the money and the opportunity for wealth that may exist there.
Again, thank you all for sticking with us. So, would anyone like to comment on the last two films that we watched? Who in our government is working on the energy transition plan? Is anyone working on this plan that we need?
Yeah, both of those films really drove home that the education and training part of it to learn those new technologies. And I heard bits and pieces of things being done also here in the Pittsburgh area, but I don't have the whole picture.
It's difficult to find that whole picture.
The governor has a new energy transition task force, and he has people from practically every sector that's an important sector. He has people from the environmental community. He has people from the fracking gas community, labor community, and they're all kind of locked up in a room trying to come together. So it is a very, very a good way for getting people to move forward on this. There's also a lot of money at the state level of the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection for doing this.
So glad you're with us tonight, Phyllis. You're a font of knowledge on the topic. It's comforting to know that at least we're working on this on the state level. That gives me hope, if not at the national level. There's a lot of opportunity, as everyone's been saying. I know for a fact that there are people working in the industry to try to recruit workers from the coal and the natural gas industry. Unfortunately, a man that I know passed away of a massive stroke at age 61, and his name was Ron Godovic, and he designed and built vertical wind turbines here in Pittsburgh. They were called Windstacks Energy. And I believe the company is still going, but I have not been able to find a new contact there. And Ron was trying to recruit people from Appalachia in the coal industry because young people in their 20s and 30s really don't want to work in the coal industry. So contrary to what the elected officials are telling them, these people want out. Who wants to go into the ground and risk your life every day from collapse and risk getting diseases that end your life at age 40 or 50 because of what you're breathing underneath the ground? So they definitely want to get out. But they have a hard time doing so because their cultural barriers. They often are people of faith, and they're very tied to their communities and their families. So one thing I was hoping that PA IPL could work on with Ron was to provide these people who wanted to transition to our region and work for him can find a home for them, a faith home, maybe supplies. There are many organizations here that provide furniture and kitchenware and cookware and blankets and coats and that sort of thing. So I was hoping that would come through. So I'm still trying to, in the background, trying to make that happen. So I encourage you all to keep looking for those opportunities, and we'll certainly keep you informed too. One thing I hadn't thought of before were the auto mechanics. 700,000 auto mechanics across the U.S. That's quite a number of people. I've heard that some mechanics who have transitioned to electric vehicles really like working on them. So it appears that there's potential there, but I'm not an expert on that topic.
I think that Phil made a really good point about the amount of maintenance that electric vehicles need. And that will eliminate jobs. No question about that. I mean, I have an electric car. I've had it for over 3 years. The only maintenance I've ever had on it is I've rotated my tires. I mean, that's pretty amazing. Your brakes don't fail because you have regenerative braking and you're not braking at a stoplight. So it's a completely different way of doing it. And some of the mechanics that I know who are like at dealers, they're very happy to work on the electric cars, but the mechanics that are not at dealers, they're not there yet. They don't know what to do other than change my tires or something like that. But, you know, they go under the hood and it's like, I don't know. I mean, they have to be totally trained. I think we just have to realize that people are going to be shifting industries, not staying in the same job that they've had. And, you know, there's going to be lots of clean power jobs, but they're not the same jobs. Everybody needs to be retrained. So I was particularly heartened by the Navajo example.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
I think a lot of this is going to come from private industry. I mean, government obviously is almost like a barrier. I'm actually in Meadville instead of Pittsburgh. I've been on your list. I wanted to join you this evening, but I'm a native of West Virginia. And we have an alum from Allegheny College here who went back to West Virginia and started a company called Solar Holler, where he is training young Appalachians. He's sourcing all of their materials from Appalachia, Ohio, West Virginia, and again, like you said, Kathy, trying to give them a future other than coal. And his company is really doing well. So I think, you know, we can see a lot of pockets. That last short video, it looked like that Charger Help was also people who saw a need and created a company to train technicians to keep the charging stations working. So I think when we get frustrated with how slow government's working, it's helpful to see these, you know, private corporations stepping up and just going ahead and doing the work.
Is there a system of apprenticeships that companies offer?
I believe folks like the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers are stepping up and offering training sessions for apprentices, and they're different levels: journeyman electrician, master electrician. But those are a little slow to get started, and I think it depends on which metropolitan area, whether you're in a metropolitan area or you're in a smaller town. So it's great to check in with labor unions if you know of folks who are looking for that kind of training. I think we can turn to the labor unions themselves. Were you going to say something else, Jane?
No, I was just I was thinking about another film I had used for one of my classes of programs training like wind technicians, the turbine technicians and stuff. And so I think there are programs like that, but I hadn't thought about apprenticeships.
Yeah, I just haven't thought about some of those peripheral industries like the mechanics, and I think there are probably a number of other ones out there that are going to be affected as well. And I think that'll be an age and resilience issue depending on where you are in your life and how flexible you are to learn new things. You know, in our region in southwestern Pennsylvania, we went through a horrible collapse of the steel industry in the 70s, and there were people who had a very difficult time with the transition to another industry, and it was largely because they were uneducated. So if we can provide them with education, I know for a fact my mother worked for a specialty steel company in the office, and she would take people's paychecks into them to be signed and for them to take home, and some people would sign their name with an X. That's how lacking they were in education. And they were making, at that time, you know, in the 70s, you know, making $60,000, $80,000 a year was a lot of money. So how do you then work at a different, you know, you're getting put into the fast food industry if that's where you are. So you're going to be making a minimum wage from there on out. So depending on where you are in your life and how flexible you are as a person, no matter what age you are, to be open to new training is something we may have to deal with on a psychological level as well.
Yeah, I mean, here in Pittsburgh, we have the high-tech and very high-powered learning with Carnegie Mellon and others. But I don't know how far these just technical training and all this is available. There's a Bitwell training company, they're doing something, and a few others, but I don't know if it's going to be enough for the need.
It's not ramping up as fast as I thought it would here. We do have the Energy Innovation Center, which was going to be a true hotbed of renewable energy training, but those courses have died back a little bit. Does anyone else from the area know if that's going well? But I think, as Jane was saying, the private industry is stepping up. There's a solar company on the north side that's training people from their own neighborhood. They're going to be folks. There are brilliant folks in every neighborhood and every culture and every ethnic group that are going to rise to the task. So, I guess we just have to have hope and faith that that's going to continue, and not always relying on government, but
I was going to make a comment about government. And so John Kane, because I'm from outside of Philadelphia, was really blocking environmental legislation because he was worried about, the high paid union workers. And in my comments to him and to his office, I think that's really short-sighted. And yes, I know those people are going to have to transition, and I was an outplacement consultant. We all have to transition. So maybe I'm too old. I have very little patience about this issue. People have to change, period. And if we can put money into training whoever wants it for the new technologies, yippee. One of the things I said to John is that these people that he's protecting with the oil industry, these high-paid union workers, are poisoning the rest of us, right? So they're killing the women and the children that don't have those jobs, and women aren't in those jobs. So it is a sexist protection. It is a deadly protection. So I really have no patience for that. And yes, they may have been paid $100 an hour, and now they have to get paid $30 an hour to be a wind person or a solar person, but they also have the chance to live longer and a healthy life. And for me to do that, and it's just too short-sighted to look at one. And I looked at the numbers when I wrote him. The numbers of people that work in, even though it's a big industry here, the numbers of people that are directly working in it is not that great compared to the rest of us that they're poisoning. So that's me.
That's actually something that struck me from those movies we watched. There were barely any women visible.
No, so it's something that is part of the outreach, is to outreach to women for a living wage.
Well, this is a great opportunity for women because these jobs are less, bulk, less muscle intensive. I had read years ago that the number of people that work in the coal industry is equal to the number of people who work at Arby's, for example. So I mean, it's a minuscule number. I forget the exact number. So
and that's my point. So the fracking people added up with the coal people is a larger number, but it's still very small compared to the rest of the workers in this state, be it recreation or agriculture or whatever. There's many other options, and why the rest of us have to suffer for the few, I don't know.
Yeah. Again, we were in Baden on Sunday distributing blueberry plants, and every time I held up a dinosaur and a sign and said, let's take your photo with the dinosaur and try to reduce fossil fuel extraction and use, they were just they're so exhausted from dealing with the fossil fuel industry and the cracker plant that's open there now to make more plastic, which again, we don't need. And now they're trying to push blue hydrogen as another excuse to frack more and keep those operations going. But these folks are just being affected horribly. And those jobs, there are no jobs. There are no jobs in that community. They were sold a really horrible line, and they have not benefited at all from the cracker plant or the fossil fuel extraction, not economically. And now they're suffering more air and water pollution as well. So every single person we talked to there had the same level of discontent.
So it was a presentation that I gave at my church over the past week about, getting off of fossil fuels, and specifically to stop funding it through the banks. And that's the Third Act campaign, as long with many other environmental organizations. And, some people in my presentation were still wanting to talk to me about recycling, and I have no more patience. I just, the time is too short. I'm like, I'm sorry. I only talked to them about advocacy, really, and getting off of fossil fuels. That was it, because the time is too short. And getting involved with so many different things just distracts them. I'm counting down the clock and going, fossil fuels. The church has to buy sustainable energy. Come on, folks.
That's a very good point, Brenda. Sometimes we do have to work with baby steps, but we are past the point where baby steps are going to make a huge difference. But if we can do them quickly, if we can implement some low-hanging fruit like LED lights or recycling, and we can get people on the team, if we can show a positive difference in a congregation or a workplace or a home, then it's sometimes easy to rally people for the bigger steps that we need.
That was exactly my thought 4 years ago.
Yeah,
And so now I'm saying that we have a Green Stewards Network because there are people across their church campus doing positive things. But collectively, I think the church itself, my church in particular, needs to say, stop. We're not going to buy non-sustainable energy. We're not going to see plastic come in at coffee hour. Come on. You know, we have to, you know, have some leadership through our organizations.
Which faith group do you adhere to?
Should I admit it? The Episcopal Church.
Oh, in Pittsburgh or out
outside of Philadelphia?
Philly.
Yeah.
We have a strong Episcopal Creation Care network here in Southwest PA.
And it really depends church by church. Our diocese, the Philadelphia diocese, had an environmental person at the diocesan level who's MIA for the last year and a half, as near as I can tell. And lots of other denominations, I think, we're doing a ton more. Presbyterians, Lutherans, Catholics, Roman Catholics. And so I think that we're a little slow getting, our congregation in particular is doing okay, but we could do a lot more.
Mm-hmm. One thing you could work on is, we're working on here, is the city of Pittsburgh implemented an energy ordinance. So facilities over 50,000 square feet are required to reduce their energy use by 50% by 2030.
Oh, wow.
And they try to work water into that as well. So many of our larger, particularly church facilities, the big old beautiful masonry buildings that we have throughout our region are actually required if they're within the city to do this. It's a little bit slow. It was getting off to a good start, but then the pandemic kind of slowed things down a little bit. But they're getting back to it, and PA IPL is trying to help the city by connecting them with those organizations that are required. And then we've had a few who aren't required who have signed on to do it. So there maybe the city of Philadelphia, I believe, does have an energy ordinance.
They may have. I'm in suburban Philly.
Yeah,
so
I'm not
that
sure
changes
what it applies to.
the regs on everything change every 5 feet. They really do. You know, whether you can use a plastic bag or whatever.
Yeah, we have 130 municipalities in Allegheny County.
Yeah.
All governed separately.
So I've also been out with the Fix Harrisburg folks, you know, to stop gerrymandering, and I do think that they have made some headway with our state legislators, that there may be some opportunities for changes within the state that we hadn't seen previously. So I'm trying to keep hope.
That's what we need to do, even though it's difficult sometimes. Every day when we wake up and drag ourselves out of bed, we have to keep that hope alive. And it's a blessing that we're spiritual people, because that will help us, I believe, not to lose that hope.
Yeah, on the bright side, the last few days I've been digging around in the Dormant Community Garden behind the municipal building. That's getting going.
That's wonderful. Keep at it, Helga. Well, thank you, Rhonda. If we don't have any other comments, would we like to go forward?
I just want to make a comment, if I may. Brenda, thank you for mentioning Third Act. I assume you all know about that organization. I'm actually the facilitator for Third Act Faith. So if any of you are interested, we're within the larger Third Act organization, but again, trying to work through faith communities. So I know Phyllis is on our list, but we'd be happy to have any of you who are interested.
Wonderful. I'll definitely look into
Liz,
that.
Jane, I went out and protested in front of Chase the other day.
Okay. going to be wonderful to send you forth with this from Pittsburgh. The mind can go in 1,000 directions, but on this beautiful path, let us walk in peace. With each step, the wind blows. With each step, a flower blooms. May it be so.
Amen. Thank you all, and please stay in touch. Whoops. Thank you all, and please stay in touch so that we can keep our work alive. Have a pleasant evening.
Thank you.
You.
Thank you.